Hello, everybody. Rick Manning, President of Americans for Limited Government here. A lot going on as always. I wanted to talk a little bit about what's happening in the speaker's race. We had some anticipation that there might be a resolution this afternoon, and there's not going to be one. There was a vote inside the House of Representatives, inside the Republican conference, and I'll just click up the Breitbart piece. Steve Scalise from Louisiana, who you probably remember was shot by a left-wing terrorist at a congressional baseball game and almost lost his life, um, received a majority of the votes of the House conference, defeating Jim Jordan, who received 99 votes to 223 votes for Scalise. Um, and but the important vote that happened before that was there was a vote on some rules, some uh, proposal on how to kind of come up with who's speaker. And it really was designed to make it so somebody had to be able to show that they could get a majority of votes on the floor to become speaker. So you didn't end up with a debacle playing out on the House floor, where you had 15 votes, people trying to become speaker. And the House Republican Conference rejected that idea, and it was a relatively complicated process of winnowing down potential nominees. But ultimately, what it would have had to do, what would have been required, is for Steve Scalise or anybody to have the nomination, they'd have to show that they had the support of enough members of the House Republican Conference to get elected on the floor, as opposed to a majority of the House Republican Conference. Once again, that proposal by Chip Roy in terms of changing the way you select who's going to be the speaker nominee was rejected by the conference as a whole. They went with whoever got the majority, could get to a majority of the House Republican Conference being the nominee. And as a result of that, they came out of that conference uh, Scalise doesn't have the votes to become speaker, and which is one of the more predictable things in the history of the world. But right now, um, you had 123 votes for Jordan, 99 votes for, I'm sorry, 123 votes for Scalise, 99 votes for Jordan. And it said 8 Republicans voted present, which is quite honestly doesn't add up to the right number of votes. So that's a little weird. So something about what Breitbart's reporting is not correct. And it's more likely that Scalise got 115, Jordan got 99, and 8 voted present. But Scalise has a problem. Now Scalise is sitting there, and he's missing. He has to get 4 more votes than what he has right now. And the ones that are holding out, the ones who are saying they're not voting for Scalise, are Max Miller from Ohio, Thomas Massey, who spoke on McCarthy's behalf during the vote last week, Chip Roy, who has been trying to broker a way forward to get to a speaker. Lauren Boebert has also stated on Twitter that she's not going to be voting for Scalise. So you have, and then you have another representative from Florida, Representative Jimenez, who was a McCarthy supporter, and pledged that Jimenez was going to vote for McCarthy. So that's so you have, essentially what's going on is uh, they don't have the votes, and they should never have planned on bringing it to the floor until they had the votes. They had a vote scheduled for 3 p.m. The vote for 3 p.m. got canceled because they don't have the votes. And so they're going to go back to the drawing board, try to figure out how to get the votes. What they need to do to get to 217, because there's some people who are um, because there's fewer, because the couple of people aren't in the House now, so the majority threshold is 217. Okay, so let's just, that's kind of speaks for itself. We're kind of, there's a lot of things they need to be doing. And I'm just going to tell you guys, one of the things that, uh, one of the things that seems to me absolutely critical is you end up in personality fights, and they have to come up with a way to round into shape where they're actually uh, getting together on issues. For instance, Thomas Massey, the reason he's not supporting Scalise is Scalise hasn't articulated a plan to be able to actually cut spending apart, doing something other than exactly what's been done the last 5 years or so with the continuing resolution omnibus, plan. And Massey says, well, if you don't have a plan to actually fix the problem, the spending problem, then you don't get to be speaker. And so he's telling everybody that unless you can come forward with a plan and bring people around a plan to actually deal with our spending problem, our government too big problem, you're just going to go. We're going to flounder our way into another December omnibus. Then Massey doesn't want to hear from you. That's a reasoned thought, and everybody there should have known it, because Massey went and told Scalise directly that that was his problem. So Scalise, if he wants Massey's vote, needs to show him that he's serious about cutting the budget, serious about cutting the spending. So there's kind of debates are going on, and every single member is sitting there saying, what does it take to get my vote for you to be speaker? And some are saying, we can't just continue along the same path we've been on, and that's pretty important. Now you'll note that some of the most ardent opponents of Kevin McCarthy were not amongst the people who said who said they wouldn't vote for Scalise. People like Matt Gaetz says he'll vote for Scalise. Bob Good, who gave a very impassioned speech on the floor last week, has not listed as one of the ones who is not voting for Scalise. So this is, once again, it's a different group of people who are raising objections based upon issues that they believe need to be taken care of, and that they don't have any certainty that the Scalise speakership will do so. And so so that's where we're at. I'm going to shift gears, and I think everybody's focus is on Israel and what's going on right now. There have been unconfirmed reports that there have been attacks in northern Israel beyond just the missiles. I've heard denials about the attacks, and I've had other people who have heard directly from people from Israel that there are attacks happening from Lebanon, from Hezbollah, and not just missile attacks, but actual serious incursions crossing the border kind of attacks. We have last notice, and last time I looked at it, Israel had about 350,000 people, military people. I don't want to call them men because it's not all men, who are preparing to go across the border and go after Hamas and go after those who perpetrated these crimes against their country, against their people. To put a kind of an interesting twist on it, an unarmed young teenager came across the border from Gaza into southern Israel, and the IDF detained him, and he was looking for food. Okay, he was looking for food, and so they took him to a place, and they gave him some medical assistance and gave him food and water. The challenge that you have in Gaza is Hamas has been the government there. It is a failed government that spends all its time, energy, and effort trying to start wars with Israel. And and the people of Gaza are, many of them are very poor, and uh, and they have no, this is not an excuse for them doing the stuff they've done. This is a recognition that there are innocents there who are also, we're going to come across the border as innocents. And the IDF, the Israel Defense Force, who met them, didn't shoot them down, didn't cut their throat, didn't throw them back over the wall and say, "Hey, take care of your own." No, they fed them, and that's a really, that's a distinction. And when the Israelis go into Gaza, they're going to be hunting down those who perpetrated the crimes and those who supported that. They're going to be trying to find the prisoners and get them home. They're going to be doing those kinds of things, and you're going to get a lot of chaff and stuff that's going to come out. And you're going to get a lot of media reports directly from Gaza with, different things that are supposedly going on. The difference is Hamas, representing Gaza, Hamas launched a military operation against a music festival. They launched a military operation against towns that were not secured, and went through the towns, raping, pillaging, and murdering anybody they found. And those they didn't murder, they kidnapped. This is not so we're not talking about, that's what a terrorist group does, because their design was to cause terror. And what they did instead is they caused Israel to unite, and in a sense that if they don't unite together, if they don't come together as a country against this threat, they're all going to die. Hamas united Israel. Israel was as splintered as it's ever been in terms of people saying they're not going to be who were part of the reservists, saying, no, I'm not showing up for my duties because they disagree with the internal policy. A lot of that is fomented by the Biden administration, by the way. But you have Israel now has united. The more liberal members of the Israeli parliament, at least one of them, have joined with Netanyahu in an emergency unified government during this wartime. And they'll go back and fighting about the other things later. But right now they've got survival at hand. And so they've united Israel. And that's how we're going to end up, and that's, so Israel has, they've united Israel, but you still have the battle on the southern front. You have the Hezbollah, which is threatening an attack from the north, and if they haven't already engaged in an attack from the north, the reports are sketchy. You have Jordan, who we normally think as being one of the countries that's kind of friendly to Israel, or at least not a launching pad. Jordan, basically, falling short of condemning the attacks and justifying them by saying, "Oh, we need a Palestinian state," and so it's Israel's fault that Hamas attacked them. That was Jordan's position, essentially. You have Syria, because they're controlled by the Russians and by Hezbollah, and Assad has, Assad's in control nominally, but he's a captured entity for all intents and purposes, and and so Hezbollah is looking at Syria as a potential launching pad for strikes against Israel. So Israel's in a position where a very small country is in a position of having to defend a pretty long border, and and so I'm not going to be surprised if Israel uses tactics which are designed to end this quickly, because a they cannot allow for it to end up having to have troops, 350,000 troops messing around down in Gaza, and another 300,000 troops in the north. There at some point, a country with only about 7 million people runs out of troops really fast, and so so that's that's the challenge that Israel faces. They're a small country, and they face an existential threat. So that's where we are in Israel right now. By the way, a couple of things that I think are important. Republicans are beginning to demand that Joe Biden rescind the $6 billion, to freeze the $6 billion. Joe Biden keeps saying, they say they control the money, but they say they can't freeze it. And so the Republicans are not letting him get away with that. They're calling his bluff. They're seeking to deny any additional funding to Hamas, and that includes funding to the United Nations Human Rights Fund, which has, for all intents and purposes, is just a pass-through to terrorist regimes like Hamas or the Palestinian Authority. So those are some of the things the Republicans are looking at. They want to hold the Israeli, or hold the Hamas accountable by denying them the U.S. funds, denying Iran U.S. funds. It's somewhat ironic, but Iran has become, when Donald Trump was president, at the end of the presidency, Iran was pumping and selling about 200,000 barrels of oil a day. 200,000 barrels of oil a day. The price of oil was about half of what it is right now. So he's selling there's only selling 200,000 barrels of oil a day at half the price. Today, they're selling 5 million barrels of oil a day. Part of that's to China, but a large significant parts of, just because we lift sanctions. So Iran is now selling 20 times as much oil to the world at twice the price. So they have 40 times the amount of money coming in through their main export, which is oil. 40 times the amount of money that's being generated just by the market for Iran, simply because of Biden's energy policies, which have helped drive the price of energy through the roof, and B, because we've dropped the sanctions, and Iraq is able to pour their oil into the world reserves and put it on the world market and sell it for market value. That's the reality. So if nothing else, just Biden's energy policy is created, and their Iranian policy has created about 40 times the oil revenue for Iran that they were getting at the end of the Trump administration. That's not counting the $6 billion or another, and billions and billions and billions more that have been released over the period of the last 3 years, as Joe Biden desperately tries to make friends with the Iranians. And it's, we've basically, in Iran, basically they'll say, okay, send us money, but they hate us, okay? Death to the great Satan. We're the great Satan when you look at, from Iran's point of view. When they say death to the great Satan, they mean if we get nuclear weapons, we're going to fire them at you, Israel, and we're going to try to get them into the United States. They're exporting their technology and what they've discovered on nukes. They're exporting to places like Venezuela, putting essentially what will become very rapidly the ability to deliver at least missiles in the United States, if not nuclear bombs, into the heartland of the United States from across the Caribbean. This is how the world has gotten under Joe Biden. these are the alliances that have occurred with Joe Biden. We're in a bind, and and what we saw happen in Israel with those savages just cutting off babies' heads, raping children, abducting people, just wantonly murdering and mutilating people, all because they were Jewish. What we saw happen there is unrestricted warfare done by people who don't have a Judeo-Christian ethos, don't have a sense of right and wrong. So that's what we have. And that's the enemy that Israel faces. And it's the enemy I think most of us acknowledge that someday we will likely face. And that is just frightening when you think about our open border and the implications of the open border. I'm trying not to get real emotional on this because I've listened for the first time in a long time. I've listened to talk radio because I want to hear what's going on and it's the only place I can actually find out. And so, and a lot of, beyond the normal sources in my phone, the people I know who are actually in Israel or who are close to what's happening in Biden administration thinking. And Mike Lee has a great thread on Twitter or X about a meeting that he was in with a 90-minute briefing on Israel that you can learn that essentially the Biden administration is giving a lot of lip service to doing stuff, but has no actual plan in terms of anything they're actually willing to do or propose to Congress to do. So but I would encourage you to go to X, look up Senator Mike Lee's account and check out that Twitter thread. It's a really, I learned a lot from that. So anyway, let's see what people have to say. I hate to be shortchanging this, but nobody needs to hear me. If I start ranting on this, I might not stop, and that's not. I don't think that's good for anybody. So let me just pull up the comments. We have no leader. We have no leader, no president, because the dementia has no clue what's going on. We have a Speaker of the House, which steps in for the president, vice president. They are no longer in office. So we have no president, no speaker for the House. We are open target for other countries. So people understand the United States, but powerful nation in the world has no commander in chief. Congress, put common sense back on and do your job because we're watching and we will. Tori, I think there's a lot of the members who, even amongst some of the ones who are saying that they're not comfortable with Scalise, I think there's a real urgency to get something done. And I know one of the things that Chip Roy was trying to do was to get them to agree that they're not going to bring up a speaker vote until they know the speaker, that person has 217 votes. There's a lot of things that have to be done, but it was kind of they put the speaker vote on today because they were trying to bully people into voting for Scalise. And, it's just not going to work that way. So I'm confident that they'll figure it out. But the fact of the matter is, if Scalise doesn't have a plan to deal with the spending, then, I don't know what he's been doing in leadership for the last, 6, 7, 8 years. Scalise also, as somebody mentions, is being treated for cancer. Once again, it is a treatable cancer, and he's got the energy to do the job from most people's accounts. As you know, he did have a long recovery from being shot a number of times, and it was a long, painful recovery. Steve Scalise is a survivor. Steve Scalise is is the perfect guy who I sit there and say is my first choice? No. We endorsed Jim Jordan. And I sent an endorsement on Jim Jordan out last night before they were having a big congressional, House conference meeting on this in an attempt to help move some votes. But the fact of the matter is, they're going to have to come up with somebody who can get 217 votes. And that person's going to have a plan for dealing with Biden, the border, and yes, the budget. Has to have a plan for dealing with all three. And there's no magic here. This is but these are things that are primary importance to our national security. They're primary importance to our long-term security, and and their primary importance to being able to rein in an out of control executive branch that is largely responsible for the world being on fire, because they've shown so they've backed away from any leadership in the world and have effectively taken a tinderbox, and they've said, well, there's no longer a fire extinguisher around. Go ahead and do what you want to do. And and that's what we've done. So it's a problem. Let's see what else we have. Mike Lazinski, and look what Biden to do our own country. It's all oil industry is a disaster done intentionally. 100%. The destruction of our capacity to outproduce, the cuts in our production, the attacks on the attempt to make it so you can't move oil by rail. The Biden administration also doesn't want us to be able to move it by pipeline. An administration that says, gee, we don't want to pump it out of Alaska because there's nobody there. But at the same time, they don't want to pump it offshore because there are people there. It's the fact of the matter is, this is an administration that has been from day one, as everybody knows, anti-fossil fuels. They have a goal of ending fossil fuels, and they took a country that was energy independent and moving towards energy dominance, and turned us into a country where the president of the United States had to go beg Saudi Arabia to try to turn on the spigots. It took our strategic oil reserve and took it down to a level where we have less than 20 days of reserves in the strategic oil reserve. Really a great idea. Let's go support Iran and create the environment where we're creating a Middle Eastern war at a time, and then also make it so we don't have strategic oil reserves. I mean, love refilling those tanks at $100 a barrel. So this is a president who's been wrong on virtually everything he's done. His energy policy is a disaster. His Middle Eastern policy is a disaster. They took a choice made by the Biden administration was to take munitions reserves that we had stored in Israel and move those from Israel to Ukraine and give them to Ukraine to use. And as a result of moving them out of Israel, those are munition reserves that were there in case Israel got attacked. So they would have extra ammunition and stuff and wouldn't have to import it. That was the purpose of it. They made our world. They made the entire world less safe, and through the Ukrainian policy, and who knows? I mean, maybe it was the right choice, maybe it wasn't. I don't think it was. We have right now China, over the last couple of days, has been flying massive numbers, more missions over Taiwan than ever before, threatening Taiwan. Trying to open up a third front, the United States, since we've got a first front in Ukraine and a second front where we're going to have two aircraft carrier groups, or two carrier groups are going to be focused on Israel. The Eisenhower is heading there from the Indian Ocean, and so you've got you only have so many carrier groups, and if you're putting two in the Middle East, then you don't have the same capacity to deploy the carrier groups into the Pacific that you need, which is Pacific's a massive ocean, and so you have a real stretching of our naval reserves, And we face some pretty dire problems. And going back um, to the House Speaker's office, one thing that's also true is the Senate isn't in session this week. And since the Senate isn't even in session, they can come back for an emergency session. But the fact is, the Senate isn't in session, so they're doing nothing. So it's not like the Speaker thing is delaying any great House action. At this point, Biden has not gone to the House of Representatives and said, "We need this from you. We need this aid package from you. We need these things done." And so the president has even provided that kind of leadership in terms of saying, "Come back to work. We've got work to do." Um, I'd like to see the work get done. I'd like to see them be able to get to a point where they have a majority for the Speaker. They have 217 votes for the Speaker. I know that Chip Roy was one of the ones who said he's not going to vote for Scalise right now. And, and part of the reason, from what has been reported, is there's no plan for moving forward. It's just the status quo. And if you're not going to have a plan for dealing with the problems facing our country, it's a condemnation on the imagination of the establishment Republican class, who don't appear willing to come up with a plan to win, and they're not willing to spend, and they won't listen to those who do have a plan to win. So with that, I'm going to just leave that. Let's see. Mike Queen, we'll be fighting here on our own turf sooner rather than later. Hopefully Trump will be in office before this takes place. Best advice I've heard is for civilians to train for lifelike situations. If you think it can't or won't happen here, you have your head buried in the sand. The enemy is here. We need to be ready. Our government is not to be trusted. Everything except for the last line, I'm going to tell you I agree with. We've been invaded. We've allowed the enemy to take root in our cities. We're going to face things that I don't think America's ever faced before. And as a result, and our government, the fact of the matter is, if you're depending on the federal government to make certain that you have water, you're in trouble. Okay, it's you have to make certain you have, be smart. I'm not a prepper, but I certainly understand those who are. So just be smart, evaluate your situation, and figure out what you need. Let's see here, Mike. You're not into the Democrat policy of selling out America. Nothing's going to work. It won't make America great again. It won't matter. Make America great again first. Yeah, well, Mike, you're right. We have to. This is the irony in all this, okay? The irony of all this House stuff. The single thing the House of Representatives should be doing right now is passing legislation that reflects what a 2025 legislative agenda looks like if a Republican is in the White House, Republicans control the House, and Republicans control the Senate. That's what the House should be doing. They should not be passing legislation worrying about whether the Senate can pass it or not. They should be passing legislation that reflects their values, how they want the country to go. Offer an alternative to Biden. They need to be going after him, not just on the impeachment stuff, which it needs to be done. They need to be going after the regulatory abuses. They need to be going after regulations that are overreach, that need to be stricken down, that need to be pulled out by the root by the next administration, using West Virginia versus EPA as a rationalization for doing it, as the legal okay to do it. There are some very direct things that can be done, and that entails going and let's pass some legislation that sets the stage for actually draining the swamp. They should be able to get those things done, lay out a legislative agenda, even if the Senate never takes it up. It does not matter. They're not going to send, but Biden's not going to sign anything that, basically rips apart his agenda. But you have to have it already processed through the process, passed into place. So when you're dealing with the first 100 days of the next administration, of the next Trump administration, or whoever ends up being the Republican nominee, or when you're dealing with that, have your legislation lined up, ready to go. So you just shoot it, it just comes out of the barrel fast. You're voting on it. You're getting these things done. They're not messaging bills. You're getting them done through the House. You're putting them over to the Senate. You're having a fight in the Senate every single day on these bills. You're not working 3 days a week. You're working 5, 6 days a week to get stuff done. That's how you do it. You also do this so you have, when you're looking at your 12 appropriations bills coming up in May, June of this year, or April, whenever they come up. They usually come up in May, June. When you have them coming up in May, June, you have your appropriations bills there. What do? You have these bills. You've already passed them by the House. You attach them into the appropriations bill. You say, we're going to do this, and we're going to do this. And you force the fight on the Senate side. Again, force fights on philosophical issues that matter. That's what you have to do. That's why I've been talking about Biden, budget, border. Set the priorities on 80% win issues, which you've got there. And Biden's 60% win issue. Go for it. Fight it. Get it, work it out. Find the language that you can pass. And so when you're ready to go, when you've won in 2024, first thing out of the box in 2025, before the new president's even inaugurated, you've got part of the agenda already passed between January 3 of 2025 and January 2025. And if you're really lucky, you've got part of that through the Senate too, and it's sitting on the president's desk, so ready to be delivered to the president's desk. So when he's taking office at 12:01, he has to give that little speech. But when he gets back to the office at 2 o'clock, he can sit there and he can say, okay, here's 5 bills you're going to sign. Boom, 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 boom. His inaugural speech could be, these bills are going to be on my desk and I'm going to sign them in the first day of my presidency. And it shows the vision of getting us out of the fiscal mess we're in, the foreign policy mess we're in, and the moral mess we're in. That's what needs to be done. That's what they need to do. And they need to quit screwing around, come to consensus on this, find a leader who will actually push for the next month, year and a half, year, 11, 13 months, I guess, 13 months to do stuff, to actually push the Republican agenda through, develop consensus, and just jam it. You just have to jam things down the Democrats' throats. That's what they are there to do. Don't pretend like you're going to pass it. Jam it down their throats. Now, the appropriations bills you have to eventually pass, so you have to work with the Democrat, or work with the Democrats in the Senate. But the rest of it, take your philosophical agenda and fight it. That's what every House of Representatives, when it's controlled by the opposition party, going into a presidential election does. It's what they're supposed to do. It's their job. They are the leaders of the Republican Party. And they need to figure out, get somebody who's speaker, who's willing to fight those fights and has a plan and has a clue and is willing to listen to his other members to be able to deal with the various issues in a comprehensive way and create the 217 votes that they need right now to pass legislation. And if the Senate doesn't pass it, the Senate doesn't pass it. That's not the criteria. They have to pass legislation to set the agenda and make it the Senate's problem. But anyway, that's where I'm at. I'm going to click back in tomorrow and we'll do another update. But I'm hoping that just pray for the world, pray for America, pray for Israel, and pray for that the people, that what is now a narrowly defined fight doesn't become a multi-nation war and become the conflagration that those who are would rather see the world in flames than the world thriving, people thriving and growing. That those just pray that the world that fight is minimized in terms of its. Not saying Israel shouldn't do what they need to do. I'm saying that other countries don't jump in and create a bigger fight than there needs necessarily to be. And I just pray this, and I hope that you'll pray it as well. Take care.